You're listening to the Slow Ride Podcast. Bikes, advice, and rumors straight from the source. TheSlowRidePodcast.com and on Twitter at TheSlowRidePod. Enjoy the ride.
Hello and welcome to the Slow Ride Podcast. Bikes, advice, and rumors straight from the source.
Hey, Tim, what number do you think it is?
I believe we're on number 86 or 87.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
86. So I'm Tim Hayes in Orlando, Florida.
Oh, hi, I'm Matt in Minneapolis.
And I am Spencer Howe in Boston, Massachusetts.
And guys, what a wonderful day. A great podcast on tap. I want to let you know that I did, in fact, order my titanium bike with a matching seat post stem and a painted-to-match fork. I am going to be a machine out there. But I have
so you're going to paint your carbon fork to look like titanium?
Yeah, isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Wait,
no. What do you guys suggest?
You paint the fork. It's like, so if what color is your bike going to be? It's going to be raw titanium, right?
Yeah.
But they'll make your carbon fork pretend it's a titanium fork?
Yeah, they paint it to match.
I mean, it's
weird.
pretending. It's kind of just like Tim's racing career. It's fine.
Are you suggesting that I shouldn't get it painted?
Well, for me at least, you paint the fork to match if the bike's painted sometimes, but if it's tie, I don't know. That seems weird. Spencer, what do you feel about that? I'm trying to think of tie bikes now that I've seen. I feel like the carbon fork should be raw carbon. Everything should be raw.
I think knowing Tim's style, I think this makes perfect sense. Really.
Oh, some like tribal prints on the fork or something?
Yeah, you should maybe think about that. Yeah.
I haven't even gotten to the real question. So my question, guys, is do I go with the classic Moots decals that are white, or do I go with the decals that say Moots in black? Knowing that I got the Campy Chorus black brakes and like also the head wheels that are all black. Do I go with the all black decals or do I go with the white decals?
Classic white.
Classic white?
Yeah.
Right.
It looks so good. Why mess with that?
That's what Sarah said. So without further ado, I think that we got to play our interview with USA Cycling President Derek Bouchard-Hall that we were honored to have the president sit down and talk with us, and we discuss a lot of wide-ranging topics that affect all of our listeners, from cyclocross streaming to podium bikes to, racing in the era of dopers, all from an Olympian and the guy that is in charge of saving USA Cycling and making us less of a financial strain.
Show.
So,
financial strain, yes.
Is there anything else you guys want to add to introduce this wonderful episode that we're proud of?
No. I think we're good. I think we should roll it.
All right. And with that, without further ado, here is Derek Bouchard-Hall, the president of USA Cycling. All right. Well, we are here on the Slow Ride Podcast with the sitting USA Cycling president, Derek Bouchard-Hall. And naturally, the most important question that we've had from all of our listeners is an official stance from USA Cycling on podium bikes. So, Mr. President, should racers be allowed to bring a bike to the podium with them as they collect their Masters 45 Plus medal?
So this is a big topic, huh? I was not aware of that. I've seen it. I mean, I part of my new role, and by the way, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not so much after that question, though.
No, it's a fair question. I mean, I've had the personal experience to deal with this because when I go to events like the national championships, I'm often the one handing out the medals, which is a lot of fun. And we've had this, and every single time I've done this, people will come and bring their bike up with the absolute best of intentions, right? They got a bike sponsor, and they want to reward that sponsor.
Yeah.
The problem is you have the folks standing next to them who don't have the same bike sponsor, and they have all the pictures being taken, and they want to be able to share with their bike sponsor, but they can't promote the bike, right? So we have not allowed bikes, and that is that we do not allow bikes to be brought up there simply because it's unfair to the other individuals. We do try to provide them an opportunity to have a picture with their bike elsewhere, and we'll be happy to spend extra time to set that up. But in terms of being up there on the podium during the ceremony with the other athletes, I think it's not a good idea. It's poor form. Nobody intends it to be that way. It's all done with the best of intentions, but it's not polite to your podium mates is what it is. And so we've not allowed it. And I've never had anybody do anything other than say, "Oh, okay," and then roll their bike away.
This is you can't see them on this Skype call, but those are tears of joy coming out of that official stance. So thank you.
And start. I'm thrilled.
And now we'll get into like the actual nuts and bolts. So you're a former professional racer. I mean, the announcement that you were taking over as president of USA Cycling. My first news of it was from Adam Meyerson, who tweeted that this is one of the greatest things of USA Cycling because of your stance on anti-doping and other things. And you came up with, Mercury Race, or you're on Mercury Racing on your last season, and then that was also, I believe, like Tom Danielson's first year, and kind of like you're in the midst of this time period of doping, and you've been affected by it, and you've also been able to go to the Olympics. So can you talk a little bit about how that's affected your racing career, and then also is affecting your kind of your stance moving forward as USA Cycling president, right? With the increase of testing and the amateur level and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely was living during the absolute worst period of it. In fact, I think that period from 95 through 2002 will probably go down in history as the worst period because the methods were very well developed, but the testing was way, way behind. And we know that the prevalence of it in the European Pro Peloton was extreme. It was the majority. And the only debate is, how strong was the majority? Was it 100 or was it 51? But it was clearly the majority. Fortunately, most of the time that I was in the sport, I was a domestic pro, and I think it was a largely clean peloton. I was actually quite disappointed to learn that it wasn't as clean as I thought when some of these things came out. Around some of the athletes that I was competing against was news to me. It wasn't really shocking, but it was incredibly disappointing to know that I was facing it in the U.S. Pro Peloton. When I was racing in Europe, I knew what the story was. I mean, it was patently obvious what was going on, and it was incredibly frustrating. And competing at the Olympics in Sydney was incredibly frustrating because you knew that doping was widespread. Of course, I say that, but you never really know. I mean, you see a lot of anecdotal evidence, sometimes direct evidence, but you never really know. But, your reason and logic tells you it's widespread. And it meant that, somebody like me who was, barely able to get into that level could not really participate in any meaningful way. And that was incredibly disappointing. And then there were a few instances where even things I really did care about, there was doping. There was events that I did know that there were athletes that would beat me one weekend and then, soon thereafter tested positive. And that was deeply, deeply painful to experience that. And I saw teammates who I liked and really respected. You mentioned Tom Danielson, but Floyd Landis was somebody I knew well, and Tyler Hamilton is somebody that I knew well. And so to see the impact it's had on them, guys who I considered to be really good guys, that was another element. So I felt personally cheated by it, but I also felt sympathy for the individuals who I thought were good guys and were pulled into something that was awful. And so it felt like, they were perpetrators of injustice. They were also victims of it as well. And so now where I am, I don't want anyone else to be in that same situation of being denied opportunity by being clean. And also I don't want to have, our young athletes having to go into that realm. And rather than cycling be what should be an incredibly positive experience in their lives and something they look back on fondly for the rest of their lives, some people it's been devastating for them. It's not a positive thing for them as a whole, and they end up battling these demons for the rest of their lives. And we don't want our athletes to have to go through that. So, for me, I think it's something we have to take very, very seriously. Any manager of the sport has to take it very, very seriously and make a legitimate effort to combat it. You have to be careful of how much emphasis you put on it. It's been a huge part of the conversations I've started, and that makes me a little uncomfortable because I don't want our sport to be about doping. But I think it's very important that we as a federation, into USA Cycling, to take a very strong stance. I use the term cheating every chance I can get to make it clear that it is cheating. And nobody wants to be a cheater. In fact, part of the reason why doping was so rampant is people never really considered it to be cheating. It was so prevalent that they kind of felt like, well, this is the game's being played, so I have to do it. Now you want it to be out enough that everybody can consider it to be cheating, and that's powerful because nobody, the people that I knew that got involved in it, I don't think they wanted to be a cheater. They simply wanted to keep up. And now we feel as though it is not widespread. You don't have to do it to be a participant, and we can call it cheating. And most people don't want to be a cheater. So we use those terms very carefully. But I don't want to dominate the conversation about cycling, and it's also something that when we start to do it at the amateur level is something you got to be very careful about. People don't want to spend extra money on this in a sport that is already considered to have high federation.
Little guy, you want to jump in on that one? Like, we were talking about this last week about the spending the extra money here on this.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I guess were you surprised that there was some pushback, or just people being upset about fees going up? Because I'm just surprised that fees would go up, or that people would be mad about that when they're willing to spend, ungodly amounts on like power meters and other useless things. But like $5 for testing to me seems reasonable, especially when you're outlining where it's going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I absolutely expected some negative feedback on it. Every time we raise any fee, it gets negative feedback, and so we absolutely expected that.
How frustrating is that, though? Like, right? Because I mean, it's really not
frustrating. I mean, it's a legitimate opinion. I mean, there was another issue about just the fees. People are also concerned about could you have amateur riders getting caught up in the dragnet because they took Sudafed the night before by accident, or because somebody was prescribed testosterone for legitimate medical needs, or because they were smoking dope the night before. And we absolutely don't want that. But, USADA knows that testing amateurs is different than testing elite, and there are protocols that are different. The limits of things they're looking for are different. The way they treat athletes when they're caught is different. There are a number of mechanisms where USADA knows that they can handle amateur athletes differently, and there are different standards applied. And people are concerned about that, and that's completely legitimate, and I expected that. And it's extra money out of people, and that's frustrating. I expected that. But, before I started this, I asked people to send me emails and provide me their feedback. And by far, the number one source of feedback I got was people saying, in the amateur racing in America, it is a free-for-all. You can do everything and anything. And I do not believe that, the people I'm racing against are clean, and it's frustrating, and you guys need to do something about it. And I agreed. I think if you have an environment where there is no threat of testing is a bad place for our sport to be. And I think we have to be very careful about how much we do put in and be very thoughtful about doing no more testing than is required to create a credible threat. But the free-for-all is not good for our sport. And we were absolutely committed to seeing what can we do to not create the atmosphere that you can do whatever you want with impunity.
Yeah.
So USA Cycling, you're raising the fees. You're cutting some fees in some places. You're raising it in others. I think a lot of the confusion that people have and a lot of the questions come up because people don't even know exactly what USA Cycling is or does. Yeah. Like, is it an insurance provider? Is it a promotion company? Is it a giant Ponzi scheme? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that's part of what you have to go up against. But yeah, I'm back to your history. I'm not a Princeton, Yale, and Harvard Business School grad, but losing $1 million in a year seems like kind of a lot, like not a good thing.
Yeah.
What are you? Is this going to right the ship or what?
No, it's not a good thing, but it's not a terrible thing. The sky is not falling. It's not a catastrophe at all. And this is not uncommon for organizations, particularly nonprofits, which is basically operating in a net even amount typically, where what your expenses are matching your revenue. And so if you have an unexpected swing in revenue, you go into the loss realm very quickly. But it is a big loss for us, and it's a big for us historically, because what we have had for a long period of time was a constant revenue growth by a constant membership growth. Just every year, just more people coming in, more races, more revenue, more than forecast. And there was a bit of money left over, and the organization was able to build up a nice balance sheet, not at all excessive, but we're talking about $10 million on a balance sheet, which is a very, very important thing for an organization like this. And that, we have a $15 million expense run rate, so that amount of revenue is not even a year's worth of expenses, that balance sheet. And so it's not an unreasonable amount, but it is a big number. But because of that, it means that we can handle these downturns. And in fact, the board and the financial management did know that would be the case, and we could have cut costs like crazy and raised fees to ride it. But rather, they rather logically said, well, we'll take the hit on the balance sheet. We do know we need to get it going. You can't do this indefinitely. You can't lose $1 million indefinitely.
So was it gravel racing then? Is it the discovery of the gravel road that really put the ding in that budget, or was it fat bikes? I think a few things have happened. One is, the entire industry is not benefiting from the level of growth it had up through 2012, and what's driving the plateauing. It's still growing nicely, but it's not the heavy numbers that it was in the past, where you could rely on selling 10% more bikes one year than the next. It plateaued after 2012. Part of it was Lance, absolutely. Part of it was just perhaps the saturation of the middle-aged male of taking up the sport. Mm-hmm. But our growth plateaued, and then we hit other things like Grand Fondos and gravel grinders, taking away some of USA Cycling shares, so fewer sanctioned events. Strava is getting, a lot of people are using that to get their competitive fix rather than through cycling. I think USA Cycling's reputation has not been strong. That might be an understatement. And that has caused people to say, I don't want to be part of this. That is not, it has not helped. Rising insurance costs, it's costing us a heck of a lot more to insure these events. And so we raise fees, and that gets people frustrated. So all of these things together meant that we're actually seeing this year a fall, very small decline, but a fall in membership for the first time in a decade. We're starting to see membership fall off just a little bit, but race sanctioning a bit more, and racer days, the amount of people are racing within USA Cycling has fallen quite strongly, and that's because people are they're still taking out licenses. We still have people doing it, but they're racing with us less because they're picking up other avenues, and that combination has led to our revenue shortfall. And cycling's a pretty expensive sport already. It takes a lot more than like taking up running. Where you buy a pair of shoes and you're good to go. Cycling, you got to buy a bike, you got to buy a kit, a helmet, shoes, all these things, and despite your best efforts at Wiggle to get bikes out there to the masses at below cost prices, people still struggle to afford racing. So I think they're definitely not stoked on the raising costs, the raising licenses. And I've seen. Would
you agree that the costs that people spend on entry fees and on their annual license is actually a relatively small portion of the overall cost of being a competitive bike racer?
I do think so. Yeah. At the end of the day, people spend $3,000 or $4,000 on a bike without thinking about it, and then gripe that entry fee is $35 rather than $30.
We do a shitty one first, and I'll work up to it. This is Eric Saunders. You're listening to the Slow Ride Podcast. Ain't no rookies in here.
Derek, you touched on it too, is the gravel grinder and the fat bikes and all that. And we did see, USA Cycling go with the fat bike national championship last year. Mm-hmm. So I do have a question for you. Will the sitting president of USA Cycling continue the tradition of being a national champion at the Fat Bike National Championships? Because you do have quite the closet full of national championship jerseys, and the people want to know, are you going to be out there in the Fat Bike National Championships this year?
Yeah. Is that the one that got away?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, but I think if I did it, I don't think I could win. I mean, you referenced this in your podcast on this, which is that it's getting more competitive, is it? We would expect more people to participate And it won't be that hard for somebody to come out and be faster than me in that. So I think it requires two things. I need to get there and participate, and I actually have to be faster than everybody else. And I think it's a good chance I'll participate. I'm not very optimistic I'd be faster than everybody else.
See, but this is when the power of being the president comes in awfully handy. Like you could be doing like executive orders, like, hey, you can't have bar ends, or like you got to have a certain tire width, and and you could really get that field down to one or two people.
Well, and one of the things one of my aspirations is to combat these sort of traditional views that people have of USA Cycling, that somebody would do something like that. So I'm absolutely not.
Well, that's a good thing.
Okay. Well, as long as we're
well there, all these, all the jokes people have about USA Cycling. Every single person in our organization knows all of the jokes. We can give you the punchlines on most of the USA Cycling jokes already, and so we're not happy about it. And where it's true, where those jokes are true, we're trying to change those things, and where they're incorrect, we're trying to change perceptions. So
do other people in the building listen to the podcast? This is a terrifying question.
I hope not.
Almost certainly. Almost.
Oh no. All right.
So, do you? You're over 35 now, so this is like a question. I'm turning racing age 35, and of course, being a cyclist, we all like refer to ourselves in our racing age when people ask how old you are. You're like, oh, my racing age is 35. So I've had to go get a titanium bike to meet that requirement. Do you have a titanium bike yourself?
I do. Yeah, I do.
And is that got
one of my old racing bikes? I've got an old Le Mans. In fact, It was the bike I raced Paris-Roubaix on. I still have it. I've kept it. Cool. And I bust it out every now and again just for fun. But yes, I do own a metal bicycle.
All right, and
good. That's good to hear.
And another kind of rapid fire question: will we be seeing a USA Cycling sanctioned gravel national championships anytime soon? We have fat bike. No.
No, not anytime soon. Is that something we can do in the future? I don't know. I mean, it's you want these events to be competitively legitimate. We can think about that, and one of the things, a more maybe relevant question is, would there be a Gran Fondo national championship? And that's,
I don't even know what that means.
Well, yeah, we're not sure either. I mean, these are immensely competitive events, and there's some people who refer to that genre as non-competitive. It's clearly a misnomer. These are competitive events. And that's something we're considering, but there's nothing on the horizon. We absolutely do. We do want to be have greater involvement in those non-traditional racing formats. Absolutely. I mean, it's the market is moving that way. Some of the challenges we're facing is that people are moving that way, and we'd like to have a positive force on it, not to regulate these events and put restrictions on, but to have some ability to participate in them and guide them in a positive way, and an avenue to get more people into the sport of competitive cycling.
I was down in Miami at the Miami Gran Fondo, and Stuart Lamp, the Southeast director, was there.
Yeah.
And I asked him about USA Cycling's presence there, and the answer, it wasn't to be the fun police, right? It was really to, you have these big cycling events on the roads, and the need for insurance is there, but then also to make it as legitimate as possible from, not just a testing standpoint, but also from a safety, right? Like if you're running these events that don't have insurance, it ends up increasing the cost to promoters and different avenues. So, I do think that is an avenue of growth with USA Cycling, and I like that, and we've seen that with some of your, the license opportunities for like those non-competitive riders or whatever they want to call them, and so that is a success, and I am pretty excited about that. So good work there, and on podium bike. So I would vote for you like 3 or 4 times so far.
I think we're all very in favor of the lowering of the 1-day license fee. That is a huge step in the right direction, in my opinion. $10, it's still steep, but it seems like reasonable, and it gives people, more incentive to try it out once or twice before they jump off the deep end and buy a license. Whereas 15 just seemed to make a 1-day event, kind of inaccessible.
It does. I mean, you add that on top of the entry fee, and all of a sudden, you're looking at a number to try it out that it's very high. I mean, we worked very hard to do that. It's quite expensive potentially for us to do that. A lot depends on how the impact that it has on annual licenses, and whether people stop taking out annual licenses in order to just do the one day. That is a big concern. But we set out some list of objectives, when we were trying to adjust fees. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here with the fees adjustments? And there's a lot, and sometimes they were competing. Like, one is, well, we need to start making a dent into our operating loss. We're still going to be operating a significant loss next year, but we needed to start moving in the right direction. But then one of the core things was reducing barriers to entry. How do we make it getting people into the sport as cheap as reasonable? And that we felt the one-day one was crucial. Yeah. So that was one of the first things we did, and then try to balance it from there.
Yeah. Anything that makes it easier is positive. I mean, we got a message earlier this week from Adam Meyerson, who we mentioned earlier. He wanted to know if you remembered him sleeping on your floor in Princeton on his way to some races. So, that's like the level people are at. They need to save money where they can.
Yeah, well, I mean, I spent a lot of time sleeping on floors in my day. I do remember Adam sleeping on my floor. Sure do.
That's good. We'll pass that along for sure.
I was going to ask, I know you talked a little bit about wanting to increase funding at the elite level, like for national teams and Olympics and stuff, or at least I think I heard that in a previous interview you did. How does that look, I guess? Because we got a question from one of our listeners asking how come national teams, like you make the cyclocross world's team, you have to pay for your travel and things like that. Like, how do you want to fund those things? How do you want that to work? Yeah, I mean, I saw on Twitter somebody cynically asked me if I have to pay for my own kit, my own
so I know. But yeah, I mean, we've got, we support over 300 athletes across all of our disciplines, juniors, and U23s and elites to compete at the elite level. And our current spending level is, in the last few years, has been between about $3.8 and $4.5 million. So that's, we got called $4 million is what we have to spend on all of those athletes. And it's really expensive to send athletes all over the world and to pay for coaches and do what we do. And we do it on a shoestring budget. I mean, $4 million is not even close to what you would want to do. I mean, to compare it, the Sky team is probably operating on 10 times larger than that. Our peers, NGBs in other countries, are 2 to 3 times that level. And that's just the reality. We have no government funding whatsoever to support us the way all the other countries do. We do it through the USOC gives us a lot of funding. They're focused on Olympic medals. We have a foundation of wealthy donors that support the sport. We do receive some sponsorship money, and that's all that we have. The rest is from our general operations of the membership, and so we have very limited funds, and it's really hard to support all of those teams. And we absolutely do not support them at the level that we would like to. Absolutely not. And, in fact, I asked our athletics director how much money would it take to have sort of the base level of support. We're not talking about, really putting the foot on the gas and really having an impressive development program. So bare minimum, the budget comes out to 6. So we're only at 2/3 of what we need to run it the way we want. And so that ends up happening is, we have a choice to make. Do we ask our membership to spend more money to pay the plane tickets to people who attend cyclocross worlds, or do we ask the participants to pay the money? And the trade-off we're making now, in some cases, is the participants. And it's different by discipline, but that's where it is.
And you have, that's
incredibly disappointing for me to have to do that. I mean, I consider that to be a failure of our organization to have to do that, but it's where we are.
We did see the the announcement of the bubble over the velodrome at the Olympic Training Center, and I know that track racing is dear to you. And a lot of folks, even on the road scene, they completely forget about the whole BMX side of things, that USA Cycling is in charge of that now, being an Olympic sport, and, that is a governing body. Do you, for your time, that you spend on, an average day or, when you're going out doing the sponsorship, it's obviously, road is still the biggest portion of your time, or do you, try to go, quarter it up as evenly as possible? Maybe track's a little bit smaller just because of marketing budget or whatnot. But how much time do you spend with mountain biking and BMX and track versus road?
Well, I don't know that there's very much time I spend on any discipline specifically. Most of the stuff I do is more across the entire organization. But a good question to ask is sort of a corollary to that is how much resource is USA Cycling applying to various disciplines.
Thanks for doing my job. I like it. You're good at this.
and there's no doubt that we've been a road-centric organization. I think we've tried to make steps. We have coaches across all of the disciplines in the elite side. But one of my observations is within our organization on the amateur side, more people tend to be roadies, and we don't have a lot of mountain biking insight within our organization. More so cyclocross, not much track at all, and BMX non-existent because our BMX, the amateur side of the sport, is run entirely outside of USA Cycling. There's a separate organization called USA BMX that runs the sport. We just do the elite, and so that's appropriate. But the biggest gap in our organization is mountain bike, no doubt about it. And we don't have the proper resource to really support that sport, and it's something that would like to improve because it's not. Our whole relationship with the mountain biking side, as difficult it is on the road side, it's much worse on the mountain bike side. We just have we struggle much more. There's a big culture, and I'm not sure what the solution is, but at least it's a problem we understand, and that's the long history of the sport. It's been very focused on the road side.
As president of USA Cycling, do you ever illegally stream cyclocross races from Europe because you cannot find any coverage of cyclocross races here in the United States? Can you answer that? Because it is the most frustrating thing, and we must do something about it. I'm trying to watch Jeremy Powers, and the rights are owned by a television network that doesn't even exist anymore. So what can we do about this?
I don't know, but it is lousy that is the case. I have the fortune that my family is still back in London, and so I go back there with some regularity, and then I have less of the problem. And I also can hop on the channel and get over to Brussels in 2 hours and go watch races live. But yeah, that is, the absence of TV is a big problem, not just in cyclocross, but across the entire sport. It is a problem, but it's these are commercial decisions made by the television networks of the amount of viewership, and right now it's not great enough to justify the expenses of doing it, which is incredibly disappointing. So I share your frustration.
Can we raise license fees $5 per rider and then use that to buy the rights so then you can put them on your YouTube channel? Because that would be totally worth it.
Yeah, I'd pay for that.
You lost me at raise fees, and I heard that.
Yeah.
Just bring it up at the next meeting for us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I have a follow up then, just because you said yet you spend time in the UK, you still spend time in the UK. Is coffee man or tea man?
Coffee.
Oh, darn. All right.
I do drink some tea, but milk only goes in coffee. It doesn't belong in tea. I have not adopted that British habit.
Yeah.
I've adopted many British habits, but coffee drink.
So we got
British habits. So we're going to see hill climb national championships and things like this.
That'd be great. I would love that.
Much more time trials, colored
10 miles.
socks. Yes, all of those things.
Okay.
Good.
We did have one listener question that, this was a personal plea from a racer, a cyclocross racer in Washington, D.C. His name's Kevin Hayes, and he has multiple top 10s in Category 3-4 cross races, oftentimes finishing in third place where the top two positions are won by juniors, like just really good juniors that have no reason to upgrade. So he just wants to know, will the president of USA Cycling grant him an upgrade because he feels that The system is just not working because the points are not going deep enough in cyclocross. And with these combined fields, only 5 are getting points in a field of 50 deep. And then there's, so now he's getting called a sandbagger and he's trying to upgrade and he can't because it keeps getting denied.
Yeah.
Can you authorize it?
It would not be for me to do. That's not my role. There's other people that would do it. I mean, I can say that, this is indicative of like these core membership issues that people get very frustrated about because not knowing the specific circumstances, it's very, that experience has a huge impact on what that individual thinks of USA Cycling and to feel like, hey, this is an unfair rule. This is not right. They should be able to get it fixed. And why can't USA Cycling sort it out? And it's just something that we want to put more resource towards. It's one thing that we have done. And our technical department, which was previously one person with a little bit of help, we are now going to 2 full-time people, and we have a great person in there, this guy Chuck Hodge. And part of that is because we want to get better at dealing with issues like this. So if I got an email on this, I would send that to Chuck Hodge, and he would think about what's the appropriate solution. But we're trying to do that, to have more resource in the organization to deal with what I call core membership concerns, because that drives the person's personal experience. And it's very hard for our organization that is, doesn't have a lot of people here. Yeah. And we have 70,000 members, and so that's 70,000 different concerns. And it's really hard to keep up on those things. But
most of them are about upgrades.
There are a lot of upgrade issues. We tend not to handle them. It's the local associations, at least in road and cyclocross and track, that are handling the upgrades. So it's the LA reps. In terms of policy, we are involved in that, and we've struggled to deal with all of those issues.
So no presidential pardon like the Thanksgiving turkey is what you're saying.
Unfortunately, not. I'm not that powerful. I defer to people who are specialists on this.
Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah. You're a jet setter, right? Your family, cosmopolitan guy, family still in London. I mean, you've been all over the world. You've raced the Olympics, Sydney. You've seen some amazing cities and lots of great bike races. So, in your opinion, is Iowa City, Iowa, ready to host the world at a World Cup race for cyclocross?
Oh, sure. I think the city could do it for sure. I mean, have you been to these Belgian towns that run these amazing cyclocross races? It's not the size and scope of the town that matters. It has to do with the passionate group that's running the event. And if they are passionate about it and get some community support in terms of funding, absolutely, positively, Iowa City could have an incredible World Cup.
That is a good form of endorsement, and we're big fans of Jingle Cross. We've been going for years. We've been to Iowa City, and if that is what Belgium is like, being from Minnesota, I'm not very excited to go to Belgium at any point, but I am excited to see the Cross World Cup there.
I really like Iowa City, man. If Belgium has the co-ops
Belgium.
of that quality, I'm all into it. Best co-ops around.
We had some questions about the NCC and NRC merger and people getting bent about that. And
that's a tough one.
It seemed like NCC had a lot of good things going for it with the live streaming and all that, and kind of had created a series. And NRC was going maybe the way of the dodo a little bit, and. Are you just trying to breathe life into one or the other, or is this just a cost-saving measure, or what's going on here?
No, it's not. It's not cost-saving.
You don't have to get into the weeds either. You can just
this was recommended by our sports committees to do this, and the race directors. And there was a lot of it was surprisingly strong consensus on doing it. We're struggling with those national calendars to have them mean something and then provide value to the race promoters. And with the NCC and RC separated, it seemed like neither series was really doing very well. And the objective of a series is try to have something that gets a bit of traction, that those that are a member of that series, it brings them something in terms of attention and recognition and sponsorship, et cetera. And it just wasn't working in the previous combination. It was better before it was split. It does come with trade-offs, but that was the intention, is to get something that gets a more unified series that means something.
Okay.
We're going to be able to see something similar series-wise with cyclocross as well, because that Pro CX calendar is 60 races long and kind of watered down as well.
Yeah, it's a similar problem. I think we're not happy with that situation as well. Yeah, it's something that we're working on both sides. It is hard to create a unified calendar that brings value to the events, and some of the things that we could do it would just make us, more bureaucratic and more restrictive in who gets in, who doesn't, and that kind of stuff. The way to fix the Pro CX calendar, for instance, would be that the solutions don't seem all that great that we had available. So I don't think we're at a good solution on those yet. But we're not trying to have USA Cycling, come up with a solution here. We're trying to work with the sports committees and the race directors to find a way to improve the value of these things.
So we've got a couple of just quick rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up the interview because I know you have to go do more important things. But just who do you think from the U.S. will be the next Tour de France winner? Like, who do you see as a fan yourself? Like, who do you think that's going to be? Do we know him yet, or is it going to be?
Could TJ Van Garderen win the Tour? Yeah, under the right circumstances, I think he could. He seems to distinguish himself as our absolute best Grand Tour stage race rider. So if you were going to bet on anybody to be the next one, clearly he would be the odds-on favorite.
I'm a big fan of Talansky, so that's I like TJ, but I want Talansky to be the guy.
Other people, but winning a Grand Tour is an astonishing feat and not an easy thing to do. And it's more likely that the next Grand Tour winner comes from somebody you can't name. It's who's out there. It's a real phenomenal circumstance that comes out that somebody has that level of VO2 and natural ability, and then finds the sport and then trains themselves and stays healthy and all those things to do it. It's an unbelievable confluence of events that leads to that.
How important is it to USA Cycling, though? Like how much would that help USA Cycling? Do you think, is that a way out of the weeds a little bit to have that kind of success?
Of course it helps. I mean, the Tour de France is the single most visible event there is in cycling, and to have somebody who is successful there is no other singular result which has a great impact on the mass public in bringing attention to the sport and getting kids to think, hey, that'd be a fun thing to try out. But it's not a magic bullet. And look, I mean, our track record as a country in the Tour de France has been greater than any other country in the world over the last 2 decades.
All right.
It's been very, very helpful for the sport. Obviously it's part of our challenges today because of the circumstance with Lance, but it is incredibly helpful for the growth, but it's not essential. It's not the only means that we have. But it's great.
So then moving on from Tour de France to just races in general, in the U.S. specifically, do you have a favorite race venue? Because I know mine personally is Philadelphia.
Well, I mean, Philly was always my favorite race as a competitor. That was my favorite race of the year. I've always said that. Manning on the Wall is just a brilliant format, and the way Philadelphia comes out as a city to support is awesome. So I love that one. But, I think our 3 big races are all pretty special now, right? Tour of California, the Tour of Utah, the USA Pro Challenge all have incredibly dramatic courses, huge crowds, exciting. I love all of those.
You're losing points with me. You mentioned the Tour of California, and you don't mention the Athens Twilight Crit. By far, one of the coolest events in USA Cycling.
Yeah, I mean, I love those as well. I mean, I'm stung a little bit. I had a chance to win the Athens Twilight Crit, and I crashed in the final lap when I was probably the fastest sprinter of the small group that lapped the field, and I crashed.
All right, I understand why you're not listing it now.
And it's the second most bitter moment of my entire cycling career was that moment.
What's the first?
Our ride at Sydney was not as successful as we had hoped for. That was the most disappointing moment of my life. But I love Athens Twilight. I love all the American. I mean, I was an American bike racer, so I love the Cat's Hill Criterium in NorCal, Berkeley Hills. I mean, these are all special, wonderful events. But for right now, in the role that I have, it's particularly fun to go to these huge races that have big turnout. Fighting for our sport, that we have some of those big events.
No,
But
that's understandable.
I'm a big proponent of the dinky little race with no crowds. My friend Copperopolis, Northern California, if you know that one. There's no better course on the planet than Copperopolis. And if there's a 400 participants, there's usually about 4 spectators. It's a one to one.
That sounds like our experience.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
It sounds like every Cat 4, 5, 3 race I've ever been in.
All right.
Well, and then finally, what's next for you? When's the next Grand Fondo that you're going to be attending? When can we see you out on a bike? Yeah.
Out on a bike. I don't know. The next event I know I'm attending is Cyclocross Nationals
In Asheville at the Biltmore.
Yeah.
Are you going to the foam party?
I'm not sure if that's on my schedule, but I'm told I'm doing the donut race, which I don't know what it is, but they sold me on it when they said that I actually do get to eat donuts in the donut race. So I'm in.
All right, that's our kind of bike racer.
Donut National Champion is next on the schedule for you. Huh?
Well, great. Well, we appreciate your time. Yeah. Thanks for doing this, and then always feel free. We'll send you any type of Twitter or email questions and anything you want to tell the members of USA Cycling and non-members of USA Cycling that are listening right now. Feel free to speak to them directly.
Well, only that I appreciate this opportunity to be on your podcast, and I've listened to them and I enjoy them quite a bit. I think the thing I'd like to say is, USA Cycling is changing right now, and a lot of the stuff that we get, a lot of criticism we get is about what USA Cycling has been, and not necessarily what it is or what it's becoming. There's an immense amount of change going on in the organization in terms of the people that we have here, some of the policies that we're doing, things we're doing in the background that nobody will see for a year, like a whole IT revamp. There's no magic bullet to change this organization overnight, but there is a sensational amount of work going on to change it. And I just hope that people who are particularly critical of the organization just consider the amount of change that's going on, and think about, are they criticizing what they understand USA Cycling has been in the past versus what it is today versus what we're trying to get to in the future? Because I get a lot of criticisms where I 100% agree with what people are saying. You're absolutely right, and we're out trying to make adjustments into what we're doing. So give us a chance to see if we can live up to being an organization that I think would greater meets the aspirations of our community, which many segments of it feel disappointed, in some cases wrongly, but in some cases rightly, and we're trying to fix those. So,
well, great.
Give us a chance.
Well, thanks again for your time, and best of luck with your tenure as president. Hopefully, a long one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, no worries.
Of course, anytime.
Good day. So, guys, that was a great time of the leader of USA Cycling, and I have to admit, after sleeping on the interview for a while and seeing all of the different things that have happened since it's been a few days since we talked to President Bouchard-Hall, I'm pretty excited about the future of USA Cycling. How about you guys?
I'm pumped. Yeah, I think so. I think that's pretty good.
I'm just sad that we completely forgot to ask him if he waves to every cyclist that he passes.
That may have, I lost sleep over that. When we pointed that out, as soon as we hung up and I was getting into the editing suite, I was like, oh man, we didn't even get a soundbite. We didn't even get him to say, hey, this is President. You should listen to the Slow Ride podcast because I'm the president, and that's a direct order, or something like that.
That'd have been good.
What's the editing suite look like? I kind of always imagine you build a little fort out of couch cushions. It's kind of sort of hide yourself in there when you do the editing.
It is pretty much what I do. The editing suite, and I think I've touched on it with you guys before, is I have this awesome kicker trainer that is still in a box that's actually my desk.
So you just...
It's beautiful.
Hey,
that's cool.
I also regret that I didn't ask him if Lance Armstrong reached out and gave him an internet high five, congratulations. Because I wonder how, because Lance has to see every single item like this as a possible political ploy, maybe, right? Here he, maybe DBH can push his case to get Lance back in, or some kind of amnesty. And I was just kind of curious on that. And
He does. Yeah,
but
he
I don't
does
want
seem
to talk the whole time about
Yeah.
Lance because he did touch on it. Lance was good for the sport in the amount of growth that it brought in and publicity and getting everybody into USA Cycling. But it's also been bad for the sport because of the aftermath of the situation. And I thought that he did a good job.
And because of everybody that he got into USA Cycling.
Yeah. But anyway.
I'll leave you. Yeah.
And
I agree with you that it does seem like Lance would use. I mean, just every situation as a way to weasel his way back in. So
Yeah.
it
he's
seems
like the
any
Donald
new.
Trump of USA
Well,
Cycling. You can't
do
have
you
a
think-
conversation about it without talking about him. It's like the presidential election.
Well, do you think he's like the Pete Rose of cycling? I mean, so like we're recording this and like today or yesterday, Pete Rose didn't get his chance again to be in the hall. Like
That's totally ridiculous.
do you think that's all right? So you're coming down on the Pete Rose. I too feel that way. It just feels like sort of the same feeling of like he's this Pete Rose is like the ghost of baseball. He's there stalking it. You everybody thinks of him as being one of the greatest, but he's not like enshrined in it. And you get the same thing with Lance and other dopers of like their ghosts are always hanging over all these results.
But I
And we
think
have to
the
officially
crime-
pretend they didn't do anything good, but they did at the same time. You know?
The crime little guy is way different.
No, I know
than
it's
what
I know
Pete
it's
Rose
very
did.
different. Well, I'm sure Pete Rose never used the substances.
No.
No. Yeah. Anyway,
We're kind of in the weeds here, but let's get to
We're definitely in the
the thing
weeds.
that has since come out. And the three of us, we were talking about this earlier, is of course Molly Cameron, friend of the podcast and professional cyclocross racer out of Oregon. She was recently told that she would be unable to race in the men's Masters 40-plus race at the National Championship due to an arcane rule the USA Cycling has that they decided to enforce pretty much for the first time this year.
yeah.
and-
For how many years of
I mean, Molly
The
has been racing
racing.
in the men's elite category for what, at least 9 years? 10 years? I mean,
For as
about
long
a
as I've
decade.
been racing, yeah. Like
yeah.
I met her at Jonathan Page's Sun Prairie before it was USGP cyclocross race in I think 08. And she was racing elite then, you know. So
at Old
We
Man
had it.
Pages.
We had a Molly
Super Cyclocross
Cameron
Showdown?
We had a Molly Cameron interview from that race on the original BikeThrow.com podcast.
Not bike throw.
No,
Just
this is
bike throw?
the very
You're gonna
first.
have to-
This is Minnesota cycling news and gossip. So
edit that out.
You know,
Oof.
Molly Cameron was very, very important to us starting up as far as like someone that we followed and watched race. And now it's one of these situations that Derek Bouchard-Hall was talking about being, you know, how everyone has a bad situation or a story that could be a negative USA Cycling experience. And it seems that they're at least trying to go after this as upfront as possible. I mean, they responded to the tweet. They said, we're looking into it. We'll address this immediately. Hopefully a way that all parties can be resolved.
Yeah, and I mean that right there kind of represents a sea change, at least from the past. So let's see if it goes somewhere. But we can definitely be hopeful about it.
All right. So, other cycling news. Oleg Tinkoff also made mention that he will be leaving the sport of cycling at the end of 2016.
Do you think it's a bluff?
No, I think that he has lost so much money with with not cycling, but in his non-cycling endeavor, that he's probably needs to, you know,
Tighten up the
tighten
up the purse
checkbook up.
strings. Yeah.
I think that's
Well,
probably
you-
true too. I just think it's a pretty public. He's going to lose money, and he probably like it's a really public way to lose money. I feel like he's not gonna want to.
Now you know what
I just feel like he's like faking somehow. He's trying to get Reese interested so he can like slowly bring the price up throughout
Sell
the
it
season,
back.
and then at the end be like, nah, I don't want to sell it.
Nice. Nice. Well, you know what I like about this and about most of the other sponsorship loss announcements we've had recently? Another really big one is Rabobank leaving the women's side of the sport.
That's a bummer.
That's a blow. But like Rafa leaving Sky, everybody's announcing at least a year out or so instead of kind of waiting till like, I don't know, February of the season that's about to start and being like, nah, screw it, we're done, and
I'm
leaving
sure
everybody high
the
and
new
dry.
Europe car team will still go through their trouble about like July. Oh man, we need
They're,
folklore to be off
they're
the front
French
again.
enough that they like the tradition of waiting to the last minute to get everything done.
They barely, even though they had the sponsor, they barely had enough money for like the bank guarantees and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
Yeah.
already coming up short.
But I
Well,
appreciate that we're not leaving athletes and team managers high and dry. Like they get a full year to try and find a
Yeah,
replacement, which is
but
going
I
to be
don't think
tough
that's out of-
regardless.
That's not out of any sort of like them
Charitable
wanting to do any
goodness.
charity. That's just like there's like it's a new way to get more press
Yeah,
a year out.
but it's smart.
Plus, like look at the new Sky kits. Like they used to not like Rafa's more prominent on them.
Yeah.
Like they made the announcement, then they doubled down on the logos in the last year.
Yeah,
Well, they
they
probably
did.
just had to they probably booted up the price of the Rafa kit for so long. They're like, oh man, last year the sponsorship, you have signed here a $15 million sponsorship.
Oh, maybe it was like a balloon payment on a mortgage. It just goes up, and suddenly
Yeah, no.
there's a huge payment to make it the last year.
Well, that's that's what Inner Ring was arguing, right, on Twitter, was that maybe a lot of these guys are leaving because of the new 3-year Pro Tour license agreement.
yeah.
So Olag, he doesn't want to sign up for another 3 years through 2019. Like he'd rather just get out now. But
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, it's an exciting time to be a cycling fan, and here in the U.S., I think that things are in the right direction. I think we're all in agreement after that interview that I am personally a big fan of DBH. I think he's the perfect person to lead us through to the promised land of hopefully more riders, better races, and as a no longer being a race promoter, I'm very excited to take advantage of promoters that get to work with DBH.
Me too.
All right, guys. I really liked our interview with Derek Bouchard-Hall. We'd like to thank all of our new listeners to the podcast that are listening the first time. We got a sweet review this past week, and this one comes to us from the Boulder Running Nerd. I found this podcast while searching for cycling training podcasts and preparations for a century ride.
Uh-oh.
Editor's note, guys, we might need to change our meta tags from training podcast to expert training advice.
Yeah,
Bullshitting.
we've talked about this, but I'm glad,
I don't follow
I'm glad
racing.
The fakeness is still working.
I don't follow racing. I don't know the background of what these guys are discussing half the time, but I stuck around because they're freaking hilarious.
Why is he here?
I've listened. It gets better. I've listened to every single episode.
Oh,
We're
God.
giving them absolutely nothing that they came for, but they're still here. That's amazing.
I've listened to every single episode, and I've actually learned a lot about bike culture, etiquette, and history in the process. It feels
Awesome.
like chilling out with some friends who always crack you up, no matter what they're talking about. Totally recommend. If I ever see these guys, I'll give them all high fives for making my trainer days bearable.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we're not disappointing you with our advice. You should try to build up to that, Sentry. There's some training advice. Don't go out and do it.
I recommend a high quality bike fit.
You gotta start by using your trainer. The box that your trainer comes in as a desk for a little while before you take it out, because you don't want to jump into it too fast, otherwise you could hurt yourself.
So guys, that's kind of scary that people are just randomly finding our podcast and then listening to every episode. I mean, that's some dedication, because we have some pretty bad episodes.
There's a lot to wade through. Well, we certainly appreciate the monumentous effort there. He's been on the trainer a lot, so I don't know if anybody knows that guy, but if you race against him in your area, watch out.
Yeah, watch out. A lot of snark could be coming your way. So thanks, Boulder Running Nerd. We also got a really good email from a friend of ours, Derek, who we will read in length next week.
Oh, God.
On the Slow Ride podcast.
Want to read the whole thing?
And
It's going
find
to be
us
amazing.
Special next week. Tune in for a very special 2-hour episode of the Slow Ride Podcast.
And you can find us on Twitter at the Slow Ride Pod. And most importantly, thanks to BK1 of Rhyme Series Entertainment for the use of his album Radio Do Cannibal for our intro and outro songs. And with that, we always want you to wave at all of your fellow cyclists, including those jort-wearing nerds that you see on the trail with you.
Nice.
Bid you adieu.
The Slow Ride Podcast. Bikes, advice, and rumors straight from the source. TheSlowRidePodcast.com and on Twitter at TheSlowRidePod.
Adam Meyerson gives us a full approval of everything. So,
well, Adam and I go way back. We've known each other for ages. But yeah, he's a good guy. He's a hero of American cycling, in my opinion.
wow.
I cannot believe he's still doing it.
Fortunately, I was not recording right there, so that is never going to be said. Sorry, Adam.
Nice.